The essence of the independent mind lies not in what it thinks, but in how it thinks. Welcome to another book review. I'm Head of the Curve, and today I will be reviewing Christopher Hitchens' book, Letters to a Young Contrarian, published in 2001. So as you may know, Christopher Hitchens is an American-British polemicist, writer, orator, journalist, and he also happens to be one of my favourite intellectuals and writers. I have actually reviewed one of his books before, which was God Is Not Great. So Hitchens is very, very, very influenced by the works of George Orwell and other socio-political figures. And throughout the book, he is talking about other people in the field, and also he's critiquing other individuals, such as Mother Teresa or Bill Clinton or Henry Kissinger, etc. So in a nutshell, the premise of this book is that it is a socio-political philosophical pamphlet for those wishing to learn how to be a future intellectual or anyone associated in politics. And something I loved when I opened this book and I found this on the front page, I just felt, it's so Hitchens, it's so natural of him to just claim this on the front of the book, because everything following is just a critique of individuals and all sorts of things. But I'll read it here. I attack and criticize people myself. I have no right to expect lenience in return. I think that pretty much sums up Hitchens as an individual in politics or in journalism or whatever else he was doing in his life. Because, he was always a controversial figure, and he was also the one who was trying to expose pseudo-intellectualism or totalitarian regimes in other countries. He went to other countries like Beirut and Beijing and the Middle East quite often, and he'd do a lot of journalism over there, and he's done also a piece on Cyprus, which I want to read. So yeah, basically he's gone around a lot, and he is very educated on politics and how to compose oneself in the light of controversy and how to handle oneself in the public arena. And so throughout, he does talk about his own experiences, but he also adds a lot of comedy to it and a lot of, at the same time, wisdom. And so that is one thing I really enjoyed about the book. Its tone is really tongue-in-cheek sometimes, but it's brutally serious in other instances as well. I'll read out one quote that he wrote relating to totalitarianism and authoritarianism and whatsoever. I'll read it here. Don't allow your thinking to be done for you by any party or faction, however high-minded. Distrust any speaker who talks confidently about we or speaks in the name of us. Distrust yourself if you hear these tones creeping into your own style. The search for security and majority is not always the same as solidarity. It can be another name for consensus and tyranny and tribalism. Never forget that even if there are masses to be invoked, or the people to be praised, they and it must by definition be compromised of individuals. So, as you can probably tell, Hitchens is talking about his distaste for the closed-minded mentality, and he's also discussing the traits of an authoritarian leader and their methods to manipulate their followers. To elaborate on this point, I'll read out another one of his similar quotes in the book. One should strive to combine the maximum of impatience with a maximum of skepticism, the maximum of hatred of injustice and irrationality with the maximum of ironic self-criticism. This would mean really deciding to learn from history, rather than invoking or sloganizing it. So it's with the same tone of the previous quote, but he's saying that above all we should hope to criticize ourselves and to build ourselves above the people that pretend they're more important than we are, and that the first step to ruling the world or to having any kind of authority in it is to first start with yourself. So with some positives mentioned here, some really brilliant quotes, the book does have a few shortcomings, and I'd say mainly it's just how, if the reader isn't versed on the recent political events of the last 500 years, they might find themselves slightly bored with the premise of, or the story of which Hitchens is trying to put forward. But I think it's actually saved by Hitchens' fantastic and mesmerising writing prose. And because of this, I feel like whilst some of it may be boring if you don't understand the story behind the history of what he's talking about, just because his writing is so beautiful, you can sort of forgive it as well. Another important factor into this point that I'm making about how particular chapters might be boring is that the book only is less than 150 pages. It took me pretty much a day to read the book. So you can kind of put these negatives to one side because it is so short, and also if you wish to be an aspiring intellectual or writer or politician, this is one book, not to the level of The Prince, obviously, by Machiavelli, but it's one of those books that you really should read for that reason, if you're wishing to be of such stature in society. And so obviously with its shortcomings, I would admit that it's still worth reading, and there are just too many mesmerising quotes, to put it bluntly, that make this book so worth reading. And especially if you're a fan of Hitchens like I am, you won't really regret reading it for that reason too. I'll read out a last quote from the book, and I think this is one of the most badass and most Hitchens-esque paragraph of writing that is in the book. Beware the irrational, however seductive. Shun the transcendent and all who invite you to subordinate or annihilate yourself. Distrust compassion. Prefer dignity for yourself and others. Don't be afraid to be thought arrogant or selfish. Never be a spectator of unfairness or stupidity. Seek out argument and disputation for their own sake. The grave will supply plenty of time for silence. Suspect your own motives and all excuses. Do not live for others any more than you would expect others to live for you. So yeah, there are many other brilliant quotes like that in the book, but I won't read any more out because I want you to be yearning to read the book for yourself. And because of its shortness and because of its importance as far as I'm concerned, I really do hope that you find this book to be worth your time. All in all, I just had a really great time reading this book. Hitchens is by far one of my favourite intellectuals, as I've mentioned, and I just love his writing. It's so poetic, entertaining, but devastatingly serious at the same time. And to me, to achieve that as a writer is phenomenal. I will review more of his books as time passes. I'm yet to read his book on Mother Teresa, on Cyprus, on Henry Kissinger. So yeah, many exciting new book reviews by Hitchens are on the way. So to wrap this video up, make sure you check out my Goodreads, where you can check out the books that I read or want to read, and for yourself as well. It's a very useful tool. And of course, follow me on my Instagram, my main page, or where I post things, quotes, whatsoever. And be sure to also, if you are kind enough in your heart, to donate to me on my Patreon. And on here you can find all sorts of exclusive content, such as my philosophical essays and my psychology essays, and also my short films that I've acted in and whatsoever. So there's many more benefits apart from what I've mentioned. But yeah, if you feel generous enough to donate to me, that would be very much appreciated. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next week for another book review. Adios.